Hey folks, this is Roy of Roy's Basement. If you love pool, let's get ready to rumble.
Hey, Demetrius, can you do me a favor and go wake up Rob? We got a podcast to do.
We have a podcast to do.
Look, he's here.
There's been so much happening that it's hard to keep up.
I think Demetrius said it. Demetrius said it perfectly before the podcast started. We've tried to do this at 10 o'clock in the morning. We've tried to do this at 10 o'clock at night. It just doesn't work out for timing-wise, so we tried 8 o'clock at night. Rob's asleep already. How does that work? We just can't make you happy, Rob.
I'm impossible. I know.
Oh, we're back again. And I am currently watching Roy's Basement put a live stream on between Joshua Filler and Tony Chohan. And I am not going to lie, I'm a little tickled pink. I see Joshua Filler wearing a Cue It Up t-shirt on the stream. How cool is that?
It's very cool. It's good, man. I mentioned to you when we were talking, but of course, Cue It Up is going to be known, as the podcast, and that's something that you provide that we all enjoy. But then it's really cool that you're extending way beyond that, and it's becoming, a community, whether it's watch groups for these live streams, or whether it's, different content that you publish on YouTube or on your page, or whether it's events like the Cue It Up Cup or different matches that you contribute to arranging, or Moscone Cup trips. But it's really exciting, man. Pool, a big part of what makes pool fun is the camaraderie with the people that share the journey. And I'm glad that we can all get under one banner.
Thanks. I needed that affirmation. I was really fishing for that compliment. Thanks, Demetrius.
Yeah, no problem. I'm coin operator, man. It's just...
Oh, no, that's fun. That's fun. So speaking of exactly what you were saying, we are trying to build communities, and part of community equals swag. So I am going to be backstory. I ordered 40 or 50 hoodies back in January, and I took them to the Wisconsin State Pool Players Association, their state tournament, and I sold out of all of them immediately. They were a big hit. And I was going to order more so that I could open them up to the internet people who are not from Wisconsin. And then COVID-19 hit. So I decided it would be a bad idea to order them then, because I didn't want to get stuck with the overhead if people didn't want to buy them during that time. So COVID is maybe starting to calm down now. Who knows? It depends on who you ask, I guess. But I am going to order some more hoodies. I made a post out on Facebook. So if anybody wants a hoodie, I'm going to run some specials with them too. So if you want one, definitely reach out to me, let me know, or go to the Facebook page and post it. And if you don't have a Facebook, reach out to me via email, thecueituppodcast.com. You can get a hold of me there, and you can put one in, and I will make sure that I get you a hoodie once they are available. So that's fun, and it is something new to add to, the community that we're building, like Dimitri said.
They look sharp, man. I saw the pictures, and I'm looking forward to getting one myself. I think we missed it, though. We should have had the Cue It Up face masks. We were asleep at the wheel.
What were we thinking? Clearly we weren't. I think that's the right answer there.
Oh, well. There's always the next pandemic.
Yeah.
It's clear you're not a time traveler, Nate.
That is really funny. That is really funny, Dimitri. It's a lot funnier than it should be.
That's good.
That's not a great transition into what I have to talk about now, but I'll use it anyways. Getting stuff cleared up in the beginning. So let's get this started with, and this is never an easy thing to say, but so I just graduated, I guess, this past weekend. Yay for me. So while I was in college, I was kind of toying around with the idea of once graduating, not having to get a quote-unquote real job and just try to do the podcast full-time. So back in February, if you've been around with the podcast for a while, you would know that I was pushing the Patreon system quite a bit for the podcast during that time. And once the COVID kind of lockdown started and people were starting to lose their jobs and people were furloughed and stuff like that. I just didn't feel right asking people to potentially become part of the Patreon system when the whole financial situation for people's lives are kind of thrown around in limbo. And it's still kind of to that point today. But because I did just end up graduating, at this point in time, the podcast is nowhere close to being sustainable financially. And a lot of that is actually on me too, because I haven't pushed things as well. But the Patreons have completely dried up, and that is one, because I haven't really pushed it, and two, because it's obviously a weird time for people's finances and stuff, and I get that. But on top of that, during this shutdown, you would actually think that people would probably end up wanting to consume more podcasts and more audio type entertainment, and that has completely not been the case. A lot of the companies that sponsor podcasts, like third-party stuff like Harry's Razors, ZipRecruiter, stuff like that, they've actually been drying up almost exclusively during this shutdown. So, as if you've been around for a little while, you know that I had sponsors sent up until March, and then after March, I actually decided that I was not going to have any more sponsors in Pool. And one of the reasons for that was because I wanted to try to bring in third-party money. Pool does not have enough outside sponsors, and I thought that this would be a really good opportunity to get some outside sponsors into the game. Secondly, I didn't want to feel like I was, I guess, pressured into endorsing a product that I didn't like. And the example that I kind of gave was, let's say Walmart comes to me and they want to sponsor the podcast with Sportscraft cues. Everybody in the world knows that those cues are absolutely garbage, but they're paying me to say how great their product is and that I love their product and I shoot with it and all that stuff. And it's just not true. So, I mean, that's an extreme example, of course, but it's not a huge jump to go from there to some of the lower tiered quality cues that are out there that, they really do a lot of marketing because they sell a lot of cues to beginner players and stuff like that. And there's a lot more beginner players than there are shortstops and pros. So that was kind of my reasoning for getting rid of the actual sponsors inside of the Pool community. And I was kind of doing that with the expectation that I was going to be able to get these third-party sponsors for the podcast pretty easily because they're not super hard to get using the hosting website that I use for the podcast. However, like I said, they have been completely dried up. They're really not sponsoring a lot of other podcasts. And it's not just my podcast that's having this problem. So a few of the other podcasts that I listen to as well that aren't super big are having the same problems that I am now having with getting those third-party sponsors for the podcast. So that kind of took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting that. And that was another big thing that really kind of stung when it comes to building a financial future with the podcast. I guess all of this is to say that I'm at a crossroads right now where I'm either going to go out and get a job and be a functioning part of society, which is perfectly okay. I have no problem doing that. But if that is the case, and I do go out and get a job, that is going to put the future of the podcast in question. Not as a whole. So we will be doing the podcast no matter what. We'll still do the one once a week. We'll try to get that out as best we can. I still plan on, like I said, getting out one episode a week, the recaps, what happened, what's coming up, stuff like that. The part where the podcast is going to get thrown into a bit of a limbo is the side projects that I do, like the Cue It Up Cup that we did, some of the interviews I do with the players and the promoters. Those do take a lot of time to do, both with organization, recording, editing, producing, marketing, stuff like that. It does take a lot of time, and I don't like to do things at a lower quality, so I am going to continue putting out the same product that I have been putting out as far as quality. There are other options that I could, kind of cut corners and save myself a lot of time, but I just don't want to do those things. So I guess basically I don't know what will happen with the podcast as far as the other things that go along with the podcast, the side fun projects and interviews and stuff like that. That is basically what's going to happen if I have to go out and get a job. And it might be no big deal. It might just be, I go to do my 8 hours. I don't have to worry about anything outside of work. Maybe I even work from home, so there's no commuting time or anything like that. And I'm able to pump out even more content because I have a structured job and a structured life. And that's a possibility. I'm not betting on that. But if there's a job out there that I am working 8 hours and maybe I have a long commute, or I have to put in extra hours off my normal quote unquote 9 to 5, it's going to get potentially a little weird. So basically, all of this is to say, the podcast is not going to be going anywhere, but if you would like the content to kind of stay how it is right now, and you have the financial means to be able to support it to where I'm able to spend more time doing it, and you just haven't got around to being part of the Patreon system before, now is definitely going to be the time. If you are unable to swing it financially, or you don't have the disposable income regardless of the situation, do not worry about it. I'm not even going to ask that you partake in this. This is going to be for the people who like what we're doing here and have the financial ability to really be able to, I guess, support the future of it. So I'm not very good at talking about stuff like this. It definitely makes me pretty uncomfortable. But I guess if there's ever a time to support the podcast in a way that is going to help with the future sustainability of the podcast, now is definitely the time. The link for that is patreon.com/QItUp. If anybody out there is interested and wants to partake in that. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Patreon or have never heard of it before, the Patreon system is essentially a way for consumers of a product to be able to help support the future of it. So it is very popular with streamers, podcasters, gamers, stuff like that, where you basically pay a monthly amount to that, similar to like a streaming fee, I guess, that, something like Pool Action TV does. You get your 6-month pass to Pool Action TV with the expectation that you are sustaining them for 6 months worth of matches. And that's similar-ish to the Patreon system. So I do have a bunch of tiers that are set up for as little as $5 and as much as $50 a month. But there's no limit. You could theoretically give $1 million a month, and you could theoretically give 1 penny a month. The tiers are just basically structure for people that don't really know what they would want to give and just basically need some structure to basically choose which one of them. But do not feel pressured like you have to give as much as $5, or, if you're really crazy generous, don't feel like $50 is the most that you could give. They are literally just there so that you have an idea on, different levels that you could potentially do. And as well, each level actually comes with a couple of swag items. Obviously, the bigger the tier, the more you get as far as swag items. And those are kind of just a thank you for, really being invested into the future of the podcast. So I really do appreciate any support that you guys want to give. And I guess that's pretty much all the information that I think you need. But if you have any more questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the podcast or myself, Nate. And, we can get you any information that you need or any. Again, it's just if you want to help with the future of the podcast and continue it going in the direction that it is going currently. Regardless, we're gonna try and do what we can to get out all of the content that we can, because we still have the goals to help make Pool as big as it possibly can be. So even if I get a job, I'm still going to be attempting to do that as best I can to help the Pool game grow in a positive direction. So I guess with that, we can jump into shout-outs. Demetrius, you said that you had one. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I really regret last week's shout-out when I shouted out to you. No, I don't regret that I shouted out to you. Let me rephrase that. I regret that I didn't shout out to the group of people that supported the Cue It Up Cup. We had a number, many people chip in to contribute to the stream and contribute to the efforts that you put forth and that we all participated in as players. And I just, that was really cool. It was cool because it wasn't like we were doing this for the money, but it was really nice to get a little something out of it. And what I did with that was I'm actually going to be able to Roy's Basement is now streaming the Filler versus Chohan one pocket. I'm guessing that's on our docket for tonight. But anyway, I'm going to be able to kind of throw a little money towards that to support that, and then also try to get the MN Pool boot camps that I'm running, get them a little maybe maybe do a little sponsorship so I can kind of, get a little visibility and maybe pick up a few students that I wouldn't have otherwise reached. So that's what I'm doing with it. Hopefully that helps me continue to grow this business and continue to help other pool players grow their pool games. And it's just really appreciated, man. So I wanted to thank the contributors, and of course, also thanks all the viewers and supporters, but those who chipped in a little bit. It means a lot. So we appreciate you.
The fun insider baseball story to that is last week there was something weird with the audio. Something was corrupted, and we actually lost our entire shout out segment last week. So you probably didn't realize it. Maybe you did. You were wondering why it wasn't.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about it. You're right, Nate. We missed it. So last week I shouted out to Nate for putting the whole thing together and all the millions of hard hours that he put in. So all of that got deleted out.
Yep.
Funny.
What a world we live in.
Poor Nate.
I know. I got such an ego boost out of that,
Nate.
and then it was gone.
He's gonna have to get a job now.
Well, we're gonna have to talk about that later.
That's like, you know what that's like? I've got a million matches on YouTube where I've lost, and then there was one match where I played Shane in the finals of the 8-ball tournament, and I played probably the greatest set of 8-ball I've ever played in my life, and ended up beating him. And for some reason, that one got deleted off YouTube. And every other match where I dog it is like, it comes up as soon as you put in my last name. You got like 18 videos of me shooting the 9 on the rail, but then the one where I beat Shane is just somewhere out there in the netherworld.
Well, now you have a nice match in the Queued Up Cup where, you're, I don't know, played awesome-ish.
Thanks. I'll settle for that.
This is where we're at tonight. We're having fun. I think at 8 o'clock we have so much more energy. This is fun. I think we should do 8 o'clock more often. Anyways.
Works for me.
So, Rob, why don't you take it away next with your shout-out?
Okay, this is a little different shout-out. It's a personal shout-out. I had picked up a regulation-sized billiard table up in Duluth, and I had the slates for it, which are large and heavy. I had them out in my trailer in the garage. And on Mother's Day, yesterday, we had a family kind of thing, and there was 2 young men in the group. My stepson, Jake Iwanski, is number one shout out, and my future son-in-law, Kyle Dagenhart. And these are 2 strapping middle 30s or so young men, and they volunteered to deliver the slates from the garage downstairs into the basement for me. And that was really a sight. If you know anything about slates and that they're shaped table slates, they're really not conducive to hauling around on a dolly because they're kind of flat and wide. Have you ever seen them move on a dolly before? Either one of you guys?
I'll tell you what, they don't work very well. And then on top of that, when you try to have 2 people carry them, side, end to end, you can carry them, and it's like they're heavy, and you're limping around thinking, I can do it, and then you got to go through a doorway, and so then you got to tilt them up on their side, so all the weight goes on one arm, and it feels like it's going to tear the arm right out of your socket.
Yeah, we had to go down 14 stairs and through 3 different doorways, and the trick on doing this, now I'll clue people in. I learned for the first time in 50 years how to do it. How to move a slate with 2 people, especially a billiard slate that's this is going a 5x10. These things weigh 300 pounds apiece. They're brutal, and you put the slate on the dolly edgewise. Have you ever seen that? The dolly's it's only like 8 inches on the bottom, sticks out. Well, you rest the slate on the dolly so it's perpendicular to the back of the dolly and sticking straight out the middle. Can you see that picture?
Got it.
Put it on so it's wide, so it goes barely through the doorway. You put it on so it's narrow. And you got to think, how am I going to keep that dolly, how am I going to keep that slate from falling left or right when I tilt it back? Well, here's the trick that I just learned for everybody out there, and you can do this with any dolly. You take the extending side arms from a chop saw. They're metal arms that come out anywhere from 12 to 20 inches. You just buy them at any hardware store. And they're like two rods, maybe 5 inches apart, with a little curl on the end. And those you stick in the sides of your chop saw, and they let you put a large piece of wood on, 8-foot long piece of wood, and cut it and not have the ends fall off on the floor or wherever. Well, you put those on you clamp them. I drilled holes and made a brace and put them on my dollies so they face straight out. And I got one about a foot off the ground and one about 3 feet off the ground. Different levels of the cross pieces of your dolly. It looks pretty goofy, but that keeps the piece of slate from falling off to the left or to the right after you tilt it back. So one guy has some of the weight on his hands on the dolly, and the other guy's lifting up on the edge and directing it and helping up or down if you're going up or down stairs. It is unbelievably easy to do with a heavy piece of slate. And a simple solution that blew my mind when I saw it. I've been messing around with pool tables for 50 years, and I've never seen anybody move a piece of slate like that. So I'm shouting out to these two young men who grabbed these pieces of slate like there was no tomorrow, and now they're in my basement.
The slate or the young men?
Yeah.
Nothing. Never mind.
I think I like zoned out from that. Sorry, Rob. I think I'm young enough where I don't have to worry about it yet. My back doesn't hurt after picking up anything over 40 pounds. So I'm too stupid to think intelligently about these things yet. Give me a couple of years.
Yeah. It was enlightening, to say the very least. I thought about taking a picture of this dolly and putting it on, I don't know, Facebook page or whatever, the WSPA page, and asking if anybody out there I wonder if John Stitch has ever seen a dolly like this.
That's a good question.
Ask him when you have him on.
All right. Well, I will take it away from here with my shout out, and my shout out is going to go to, I think it's Jay Lataputty, and he is a graphic designer. I think he would consider himself a graphic designer, but he made me up a really, really cool poster, which I posted to the podcast page, and it's just really, really neat. He does a lot of the graphic design for companies like Mez and JB Cases, Predator, a bunch of different companies that he said that he's worked with in the past, that he basically just makes them really, really cool graphic stuff for free. He just loves the game so much and he wants to help it out that he literally just donates his time to create some awesome graphics so that they can, I don't know, look really, really cool when they're marketing their stuff. So, I mean, somebody like that, it takes a special person to have that kind of level of dedication towards the game and seeing, the well-being of the game and wanting to see it grow to where he is willing to donate his time like that. So definitely huge shout out to Jay, and the pool world needs more people like you. So from there, I guess we can jump right into the podcast.
Yee-hee!
Yeehaw! So
over the edge we go.
I don't even know what you
I
just
love
said.
it when you say that.
I don't even know what you just said, Rob. We have nothing to talk about in the recap segment of the podcast. And this kind of makes sense. We did a podcast, I guess last Wednesday, was it? I think it was last Wednesday, whenever it was. And not really much has happened since. There are a couple events that are going on right now. So there is actually a WPBA women's event where they are doing a 16 women's field, and they are doing a format similar to what we did with the Cue It Up Cup. And they are basically doing a tournament style, though. So each match is a heads-up match, 10 racks, and each ball is worth 1, playing 9-ball, and the 9-ball is worth 2. So each has a maximum of 10, unless you don't take ball in hand. and you just basically break and run with no ball in hand, and then it's worth 15. That tournament is going on right now, and it can be found at the WPBA Tour Facebook page. I hope to have this out by tomorrow, and it's going to be going on, I think, all week long. So there are some really high-quality women players that are playing over there, and also there is another, like I said at the beginning, Joshua Filler and Tony Chohan are playing right now, but they're playing right now. So, I mean, there's not really anything we can recap there. So, same with the WPBA event. So I guess let's ramble aimlessly for a while and see if we come up with a cool conversation.
Well, I got a point. We talked a little bit last week about motivation. And I think I had mentioned personally that, to be respected was a motivation for me. There's many motivations. I probably have a dozen of them that I had over the years. Another real important one in pool was, and it is in other sports too, but pool was, it just seemed that you have a platform that you play in other games. You have a tennis court, there's the ball, there's the racket, here's the net, and there you go. And that's what it is all the time. The game is the same all the time. And I think what motivated me about pool in particular was the way it changes. Okay, it's confined, it's a table, it's balls, it's all that, it's pockets. But what we talked about with pattern play and that kind of thing, the game is constantly changing, so that there is always a new and an interesting problem that you face. The problem is, of course, for you personally, is making all the balls. And that, to me, with pool, that was a lot of motivation in and of itself, was that rack changes every time you break the balls and adds a new challenge every time. So I think the challenge of the game, and of course in straight pool it's running 150 or 100, whatever the game is due. In races it's running 7 racks or whatever the race is due there. That in itself was a pretty good motivator for me. A personal challenge of the game.
Yeah, I'm glad you came back to that, and Nate, I hope you're okay with motivation wrap up, because
no, I'm not.
It was
I'm not okay with it. No.
There was a question last week, and we didn't want to get super deep into it, but I've been thinking about it, and what I'd like to add about the motivation topic is there's a couple different kinds of therapy. There's the classic Freud therapy, which is like, go back into your childhood and symbolism and all these deep, unconscious stuff. But then there's another kind of therapy, which is called, I think it's called like solutions-based therapy, which is, let's not go back in time and look at, childhood and all the subconscious stuff. Let's just kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work and just find ways to do what works. And so I think about that with motivation. Like, we could sit here and say to ourselves, like, how can we, change our lives and be better people or be hungrier or find, try to find ways to inspire ourselves to be better people. Or we could just look at it and say, how about this? What are some times that you experienced something that made you feel really motivated? What were those things? And then how can we get more of that? And, how can we go out and schedule and make that part of your life? So I'll use myself as an example. When I go to a tournament, I'll just rattle off like 3 things that motivate me, roughly. So if I go to a tournament, the week before a tournament, or maybe a few weeks before a tournament, I am kind of getting ramped up and ready to fight. I have a reason to play. I'm motivated to practice. I'm visualizing the adversity I'm to be, and I'm preparing to meet that adversity. So I'm getting ramped up and I'm practicing hard. And then the week or 2 after I get back from the tournament, I'm very motivated, because I'm motivated by my successes and my losses. The things that went well inspire me to keep pushing and recognize that the work I'm putting in is making a difference and taking me the direction I want to go. But then at the same time, the things that didn't go well, that is actually motivating to me, because I can see that as well as I'm doing, if I can improve on some of those areas, then that means I'll do even better. Plus, I got a chance to see other players that are, can be inspirational and things. So when I go to a tournament, I usually have 1 to 2 weeks on each end where I gain some kind of burst of energy from that. And so I can't go to a tournament every month necessarily, at least not big ones. But by knowing that, I can say, well, I go to 4 major tournaments a year, and I just kind of spread them out so that I'm never more than 2 to 3 months away from a tournament. And so that means that I'm usually either just getting back from a tournament or just ramping up for a tournament. And it's only 4 a year, but spaced out, that's enough to make automatically like over half of my time I've got something I'm either coming back from or looking forward to. Other things that might be motivating, for example, there's watching a player that inspires you, that plays your style. So whatever, watching Filler and watching Shaw, if you're not like an explosive firepower kind of guy, maybe those guys are fun to watch, but that might be kind of discouraging, like, oh, how can I ever do that? But if you find, like, for me, I don't have that kind of firepower, but for me, I can watch people like Alex or Ralph Souquet or Nick Varner. Those are people that play more of a strategic kind of, systematic approach to pool and got ridiculous results. And so sometimes watching great players that play your style helps you kind of visualize, hey, I think I could see how I could put my game together in a way that could look like that. And so watching great players that are better than you with your styles, another one might be something like watching worse players that are better than you in a certain area. This is kind of motivating to me because if I find a player that like I can beat them, if we played 100 games, I might win 70, but yet they have a couple of talents where they can do these things really, really, really well. If I watch Josh Filler do something really well that I can't do, then I might just be like, well, he's a better player than I'll ever be, so, whatever. But when I watch weaker players do things that I struggle to do, and they do them really well, then that kind of gives me like a little, well, hey, if that guy can do it, it's not like you have to be a world champion to do it. And so that can be a motivation. So I'm not saying that these have to motivate other people. I'm not saying that they're that big of a deal. But what I'm saying is if you become aware of certain things that do fire you up to want to go practice, then make a note of it, remember those things, and then just make sure that you have those things on your calendar. Make sure you make time to watch a player that inspires you. Make sure you make time to go to a tournament at least, more than once every couple of years. Make sure that you have time to spar with somebody that is going to be strong in an area that you're not strong, that pushes you to want to improve there. And if you just understand what things motivate you and then put them on your calendar, like that's actually all there is to it. You don't have to go back and analyze your childhood.
No, Nate, you don't have to.
I think
I wouldn't analyze your childhood. You might be disappointed.
Shut up, Rob. Nobody likes you.
Listen, I want to know, Nate, what motivates you to do the podcast?
Well, that's a fun question, and I could probably answer that. Why don't we close out the podcast with that? I think that'd be a fun thing to close out the podcast with.
Fine.
But and I only say that right there because I want to nip this conversation in the butt right then and there because you gave me a really good idea on something that we could talk about at the end of the podcast for our discussion topic. But we have a little bit more time here, I think. And the next thing that I want to talk about, it's really, really easy if you find a way to motivate yourself, right? I mean, if you're addicted to the game and all you can think about in your entire life is playing pool and when are you going to get your next fix in and, how are you improving? Well, all this good stuff about the game. We've all been there at some point in time if you're a top player or even if you're, even an average pool player. You don't get there by, casually hitting balls for 10 years straight. I mean, you actually have to go through a phase in your life where the game is everything to you and that's the only thing that you want to do. But I think that's something that's really, really hard to teach, and it's really hard to make somebody want to do something. It's really hard to make somebody want to get better. But there are a lot of people, and I will include myself in this, where at one point in time you had that, and maybe it got you to a level that is a decent level of a pool player. Maybe you're not a world beater, but you're decent. But you want to get better, even though you can't get yourself back to that addiction level that you had maybe when you were younger, or maybe when you were just kind of grinding through the ranks. I think a really interesting discussion, and maybe you would be able to discuss this, Rob. But I think Rob and I are probably more likely to be able to answer this because Demetrius, it sounds like you never really left wanting to get better at almost a crazed level. You just kind of understand your time constraints, and that's kind of your limitations. And that is a really long lead up into how do you fake addiction so that you can still motivate yourself to try to get better, even though you really don't necessarily want to? And what I mean by that is forcing yourself to go through the motions in a way that replicates the kind of fire that you had back when you were maybe a little bit younger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you got to find a step to take. That's all.
Yeah.
It's like writing a book. If you don't write the first page, you can't start in the middle of the book sometimes and write it.
Yeah.
So that's a fact in pool. It helps to be a little obsessive compulsive, to be a pool player.
Of course. But even if
versus
but even
other
if you're,
sports, really, I mean, it's that type of a game.
Yes, but even if you're not, that's kind of what I would like to talk about now is even if you aren't obsessive compulsive, and even if you don't have, maybe that fire to get better like you had, 5, 10, 20 years ago, whatever it was, whenever you really were grinding through the ranks, how do you fake that as best you can to still get the best out of your game and still improve, even though you might not be, at addiction level like you were before? And yeah, but Demetrius, did that make sense? What I was trying to get across?
Yes, and I actually think that I have gone through that, because the fact is that when I was a kid, I was completely all in on pool, and then I had to put it on the back burner because of marriage, family, children, job, career. And that doesn't mean that, I quit for 5 years at one point in my life, and then there was periods of my life where it just had to take a big back burner. And so what happened to me is, here's what I think. And I think that there's reasons. If people have ever been bit with the pool bug, it's still there, but it's not that the desire is gone. It's that there is an interference with the desire. It's like it's no longer on the surface. It's way underground where it's like filled. It's not quite. It seems like it's buried deep underneath this clutter of life and all these other things and doubts and fears and thoughts. And here's what I think is the wet blanket that interferes with that desire. So it's not about kindling the flames. It's not solely about kindling the flames. It's about removing the wet blanket that's interfering. And I think that here's what it is. Unfortunately, and I don't know if it's just the pool world or humankind or whatever, but the message, there's a lot of people out there that just are disinterested, that send a message that people, that you can't do it, or that it's not important that you do it. Whether it's a spouse that's, not really, that doesn't understand, they look at pool as an irritation that takes away your time and resources and attention from them or from the family, and they don't understand why pool is important, or people that just have you pegged as being an average player, that's just how they see you, and they just don't think that you'll ever get any better. And so, you never asked their opinion, and they never necessarily came out and said it, but just a bunch of people that just kind of look at you like, yeah, you're just, whatever, you're just some bum. And but somehow or other, it's like there's not a lot of encouragement in the world. There's a lot of, the message that the world seems to shout is, you can't do it, and it's really not that important. And why are you wasting your time with this game? And why do you think you can do it? And so it's really easy to think that you can't do it and that it's not important. And then the other thing that I think is paired with that is that there's a fear of waking up that desire again. Because what if you wake up that desire again and you can't just go chase it, because you do have other responsibilities, and we're adults, and we're not, teenagers that can just, live on a pool table. So now what happens if I do wake up that desire to be great again, but then I can't go necessarily everything I want to do and travel around the world and play pool. So then I'll just be heartbroken. I know I'm speaking for myself. I know that I've been afraid at times of waking up my desire because I was afraid that it would hurt too much. Like, I've already grieved the loss of the fact that I'm never going to be a world champion. And so I'm afraid a little bit of wanting it that bad again. And I was also a little bit afraid. The last one is I was a little bit afraid that I'd go off the rails and lose control of my life. Like, I had, my family, everything was going good with my career. Like, what if I wake up my pool desires and then I go off the rails and let the rest of my life go because I just can't put the pool view down, and somehow I just become, and it impacts my life. So all these fears about it could interfere with my life, or I might be heartbroken because I can't fulfill those desires. And besides, the rest of the world doesn't think it's important, and they don't think I could ever do it anyway. And what I'm here to tell you as the listeners is that don't believe any of that. Like, it's not that I think you could do it, because I don't even know who I'm talking to, but anybody could do it. It's not something that's about if you're a worthy human being or not. It's a skill that you can develop and learn. And that if you love the game, it is important, because we are here to develop our gifts and celebrate our lives by being the best version of ourselves we can be. And if it's meaningful to you, then it's meaningful to you, and you don't need to justify that to anybody else. And that it's not going to derail your life. It's going to fulfill you, and you can manage it, and it can be a part of your life, and you can fulfill, your longing to improve and be great at pool. And so I think that a big part of it is we erect these barriers to our motivation as a way to kind of manage our lives and rein in our passion. It's not that our passion's gone. We've built in these barriers to try to manage our passion, and then we forget how to take them off. And we forget that we put them there, and they need to serve us. We don't need to serve them. We don't need to be shackled. We don't need to put ourselves on a leash. We can let the fires burn, and then take the time and energy we have and do the best we can with what we have.
I feel like I just went into like psychology 102.
There it is. Just, you got what you got. Do the best you can with it. Yeah. And that's a great attitude from rack to rack, no matter what you're doing. I mean,
that's definitely true right there.
This is what I want to be doing. You say that to yourself, and then whatever solution is ahead of you, you perform it the best you can.
Yeah, that definitely has a macro and a
nice,
micro.
solid way to look at stuff.
That's definitely has a micro and a macro way of looking at it. But I wouldn't mind chatting in a little bit about this as well. Kind of where I was going with.
You want to turn?
Yeah. Kind of where I was.
See, a discussion, everybody should be able to talk in a discussion, right?
Well, it's my turn then. My turn. If you don't have the addictive kind of mentality that you had at one point in time, there are still ways that I have found that I can fake it for enough time to really get a lot out of what I'm trying to do at the given moment. It's really, really, really easy during the pool season, right? Because you always have that next event that you're looking forward to. There's events at least in Wisconsin, there's multiple events every single weekend. Whether or not I can play in them, being the Fargo that I'm at, that maybe that's a problem in your state, maybe it's not. But in Wisconsin, I know that I probably have about maybe two events per month that I can play in. So regardless, there's always something that I can look forward to, and there's always going to be something on the docket that I can train for. If you really just take the game and you break it down to, I don't want to be a world beater, I don't want to be in the Mosconi Cup next year or 2 years, 3 years, or 3 years or 4 years from now. I just want to perform the best that I can possibly do 2.5 weeks from now in this event that I'm looking forward to. And that is the only thing in my entire pool world that matters right now. And then once that's done, the next one is the same way. You take that same mentality. You look at it in chunks of your life from 2 to 3 weeks, whenever the next event is that you have to look forward to. If you can break the game down into smaller chunks like that, especially if you don't have the big dream goals like Demetrius was talking about, he's never going to be a world beater, as he said. He's never going to be a top player in the world, and that was tough to him. You can still look at it from, well, maybe I'm not going to beat Shane Van Boning in a race to 100 next year, but I can give my best effort in this next event that I'm going to be playing in 3 weeks from right now. And then after that, it's going to be 2 weeks from there. And then it's going to be 4 weeks from there. And you look at your game in 2 to 4 week increments, and you try to improve on your recent performance as best you can. And just because you might win one pool tournament and then go 2-0 in the next, and that doesn't mean that the 2-0 was a failure and the win was a success. You got to keep your goals short term. You got to keep your vision short term. If you need to fake this, of course, this is all as if you don't really have the motivation. You got to keep your vision so kind of short term that you're constantly seeing these small improvements that you're trying to see. Maybe it's you made a bank at a critical moment and that's what you've been working on. Or your opponent played a really tough safety and you're down on the 8 ball and you kick the 8 ball in. Or maybe it's you made a jump shot on the hill and you haven't been jumping the balls well. You keep your goals so limited in near term that you're constantly seeing these improvements that you really keep yourself motivated in these 2 to 4 week chunks. That is a way that I have really found works well for me to keep myself motivated during the pool season. I have one more thing that I'd like to talk about, but if either of you want to jump in right now and say anything, feel free.
Well, I'm going to throw this in because for 15 years, or maybe 20, and this is just in Wisconsin pool, for 20 years, my motivating factor, really, the one motivating factor I had was to beat Randy Lamar in a tournament, because he was the one person that would either put me out of the tournament or put me in a loser side every single tournament I went to, until I finally did.
Well, it's because he's the only person in all of the pool world that talks more than you do.
At least 15 years, because that's my motivation. I'm going to go, and if I get a shot at him, and it usually happened. If it wasn't him, it was Duncan or Dobie or Gene Albright. One of those 4 guys you're going to meet in a tournament, and they put you out every one. Well, heck, come on.
Yeah.
I'll get you sooner or later. That's a good motivator. Pick out a player that you never beat, and say, this is my motivation. I'm going to stick to it till I beat that guy.
Demetrius, did you have anything to say to that, or anything that you want to add to it?
No, I like what you're both saying. And Nate, and Rob. Okay, Rob. First of all, you're right. Competition and like rivalries and wanting to move up the hierarchy in the pool world. Those are all good. Good things when they're healthy and they're not like overpowering in your life. And as far as
you don't want to hate the guy because he's
there's a lot of people that tie up value of a human being and their self-worth and how important people are by how they play, and that gets a little weird. So I think as long as it's like healthy competition, I think that's good. And then Nate, if I understand right, like I don't want to oversimplify what you're saying, but what I really heard you say was just kind of like break the goals down, make them kind of smaller, shorter term, not these broad, grandiose things where you never see any progress and they feel daunting, but rather just like pick something, kind of like the way you were talking about jump shots in that video where you're like, you don't aim at the object ball, you aim at a spot on the table 6 inches in front of you that you can see, then you know that if you go that direction, you will probably hit the object ball where you wanted. It's kind of like instead of aiming at this long-term thing, you're going to pick one step, the smallest step in that direction you want to go, and just focus on taking that step. And I really like that.
Like a putt in golf.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes down to when I was addicted to the game and I was playing, 6 to 12 hours a day for like 4 hours or like 4 years basically straight, when I was basically my freshman year of high school to really my freshman year of college. I was playing 6 to 12 hours a day. I mean, it was obsessive the way I was playing. The end goal was always to be the best player in the world, or to be the best player in my area. And then, once I was the best player in my area, it was to be, the best player in the state. And I never got to that level of my game before my fire kind of dwindled out. But the idea is those long-term goals are so like enticing, and they just keep you motivated to play. But for me personally, I got to a point where I just didn't care that much to be the best player in the state anymore. I mean, I still wanted to perform at a high level, but it was the short-term goals that really drove me. It's, to get better at banking, or to get better at lagging, or getting better at jumping balls, or whatever it was. I spent a little bit too much time on the jumping balls part of it, I think. But the idea is the short-term goals really helped me. So that was what I did. And that's what I still do to really help keep myself motivated during the pool season, is just make my short-term goals extremely easy, not necessarily easy to reach, but to keep myself focused on short-term goals as opposed to the long-term goals. And the second thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is more for like in the off season, when maybe in the summer when you don't have as many events to play in, how I keep myself
or during a pandemic, maybe.
Yes, exactly. How I keep myself motivated, even though I don't have that kind of addiction level to the game, is I really just am trying to learn how to make the game fun. For so many years, the game was never fun. It was about getting the next win. It was about getting the next cash in the tournament you're playing. It's defeating that next enemy or that next player that you've been wanting to beat. The the Randy Lamars. It's always that. It's always that, right? But in the summer, that's not really a motivating factor. It's not really an option because you don't have events going on super frequently. So what I try to do during the summer is just find a way to make the game actually fun. And that's not always an easy thing to do, especially if you have an obsessive kind of desire like I do. But I've been learning to do that over the last summer. And if you have fun playing the game, you're going to want to play the game. Like, I have so much fun when I'm golfing, and I want to golf. I have so much fun when I'm playing video games with my wife, which is kind of what we've been doing during the pandemic. We found a way to start playing video games together as bonding time because we can't go anywhere. And I think that's fun, and I want to do that. I'm trying to get to that point in pool.
Is that all you do?
Shut up, Rob. And so that would be my advice, especially if you are, recently removed from the addictive phase of your game. The game might not be fun to you. It might be something that you feel like you have to do because you have to get better at the game, and it's like addicting to do that. It still might not be fun to you yet. So try to find a way to make the game fun.
Well, and I think let me just jump in here. Oh, I was just going to say real quick that, as you grow up, like Nate's saying, I think we all go through this to where our goals can change as our life changes. And so the things that motivate us can change. And Nate speaks to something I've gone through, which is there's been times I've had to change my fuel source and change my goals quite a bit. And I know that, like, I went through a lot of the same stuff where I wanted to be, the best player around. I wanted to be, like, my plan was to be the best player of my hometown, then the best player of my state, then the best player of the country, then the best player of the world. But what happened is, at some point, you start to look at those goals because once you get past your city and your state, then all of a sudden you start running into a bunch of other people with the same ideas that are willing to put it, quite a bit into it. And you start looking at what the road looks like down that path. And so then as you change your goals a little bit, it's like you can enjoy the game in ways that it's not all about a status or a Fargo rate or something else. You could actually just learn to like the game more intrinsically. And I think that that's something that we kind of all go through as we grow up with this game. So well said, Nate. Well said.
Yeah, I looked at for the fun factor of the game, for pocket pool, as you age, of course, your skills tend to diminish. They don't have to, but they tend to. And I looked at pocket pool, the downside of the game, and I compared the downside of pocket pool to the downside of three-cushion billiards. And there was no game left for me. I mean, that was just the way to go was three-cushion because there basically it's always fun, even if you don't score a point. And with pocket pool, I thought you could be playing the best pool of your life, hit a nipple on a side pocket and lose a match and be out of the tournament. I mean, what is that? How does that happen? And it doesn't just happen once in a while. If you look back on your pool playing career, how many times little things like that have made a difference? Well, you don't get that ever in three-cushion billiards. You don't catch the nipple. There isn't any.
Yeah. I'll give you this. Three-cushion is a fun game. Yeah, you are right.
Fun. It is pure fun. And I'm so glad I switched because, and I talked with Mike Miller about this too, because he stopped playing pocket pool for the same reason. It just wasn't as fun anymore.
So maybe we should just say, so maybe we should just throw in there that under the motivation topic that learning a new game, whether it's one pocket or three cushion or just trying new stuff out, continuing to be a student of the game is always a good way to.
You should know all the games. Maybe all except Lifesaver. I don't know about that one. I'm not real sure. I've played it, but I don't know.
And that statement right there means that this
What's
discussion is probably done.
The one,
That means that this discussion's probably done. So we can move on to the upcoming event that we have. And so last week we spent an entire segment of the podcast talking about Joshua Filler and Justin Bergman, and just like that,
how did we do that?
Poof, the match has been canceled. And luckily, the news fairy decided to sprinkle its magic fairy dust on us and give us something else that we can talk about. And this is starting tomorrow, and they are currently playing, like I said in the beginning, Banks right now. So I gotta feel like it's not going to be canceled at this point. Maybe Josh gets his face kicked in, or Tony gets his face kicked in so bad in Banks that it just demoralizes them and they can't play the one pocket match. But Tony Chohan and Joshua Filler are going to be playing a big one pocket matchup, and it is going to be an even race. I have to assume that this is not going to be canceled.
This is going to be a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going kind of off subject here for a second. I'm almost more excited for this one than I am for the actual 8-ball matchup. And part of that is just because, one pocket, I just find a more interesting game than big table 8-ball. But secondly, I think both players are. I think Tony Chohan plays a little bit faster than Justin Bergman, obviously. So that's also kind of a fun thing too. So this is going to be a race to 21 one pocket. They're playing even. And this is going to be Tuesday and Wednesday. So that means that I need to get my butt moving and get this released, because we are currently doing this on 5/11, which is a Monday, and this starts tomorrow. So I need to get my butt moving after this is done and get this podcast out ASAP. But this isn't, I guess, Joshua Filler and Warren Kiamko were supposed to play about a month and a half ago, and then Warren Kiamko actually got diagnosed with COVID. He actually tested positive for COVID, so that match was not able to be played. And then once he was basically past his 14-day quarantine, he went back to the Philippines. So that match was not supposed to happen, and we had kind of talked a little bit then about who we thought was going to win. I don't know, and maybe Demetrius or Rob, maybe one of you guys can correct me. I don't know that there's a huge advantage of Tony over Warren. I think they're probably pretty close players in one pocket. So, but Tony, they have different games for sure. But as far as just raw talent on the one pocket stage, maybe Tony has a slight advantage. What do you guys think?
I think it's interesting because I think that. Okay, I have a confession. I haven't seen Warren play a lot of one pocket. What I've seen Tony play quite a bit of one pocket. But my guess would be that Tony plays a more aggressive style than Warren, which I'm not saying that makes him a better player. But in terms of how Filler matches up against the two of them, Filler might do better against. Even if Tony and Warren broke even, which I think you're right. I think they're probably pretty close. But I think it might fare better for Filler to play somebody that's a little loose, because I don't know that Filler wants to play a guy that just like total suffocates styles him. You know what I mean? Whereas if you give Filler a little something to get going with, I'm not saying he's going to win because of that, but I think you're right. I think they're a very, very close game. I think people underrate Warren. I think I'm not saying people overrate Tony, because some people have him clocked right, but I think it's possible that people overrate Tony at times and they might underrate Warren. I think they're very, very close, but I do think they have a difference in styles that makes the difference in matchup interesting.
Well, I will probably say that as a general consensus, I think Tony is overrated as a one pocket player, and I don't want to sound disrespectful. It's impossible to say that and not sound disrespectful, right? But I see a lot of people who say that Tony Chohan might be the best one-pocket player in the world. I've seen that a lot, especially on Facebook. That doesn't mean anything, but maybe he's towards like 4th, 5th, 6th, something like that. But I can easily come up with 4 players that I think are just straight up better than Tony Chohan for sure. At least 3. Alex, Dennis, and Francisco, I think, are all significantly better one-pocket players. And at that point in time, maybe I shouldn't say significantly. That is disrespectful. But I do think that they are all 3 better one-pocket players. So then you come down to, well, who's next after that? And I think there's a list of about maybe 10 to 15 players throughout the world that you could all mention somewhere in that, a tiny range of, skill levels. And I guess I don't see that Tony is significantly better than anybody else from the U.S. as far as the one pocket players.
I think that what happens is it's like and he is a great player. You're right. He might be 4th in the world. He might be 10th in the world as far as one pocket goes. It's hard to know. I agree that Alex, Dennis, and Boosty are very, very strong. But then, yeah, you're right. There's something about and the reason why. So like if we've come off sounding a little disrespectful, the reason why is because there's a lot to admire about what Tony's done, which is Tony has taken a game that is, his rotation game. I mean, his Fargo's probably in the 760s. He's substantially below these guys at rotation. He does not have the same level of firepower and the same resume. And so for him to put together a game that and with the confidence and belief that he has, we always like to see somebody transcend their limits and then actually be successful. So for him to get in the ring with Dennis and win a race to 40 using his belief and his strengths, and then frankly playing a style of one pocket that looked so reckless that anybody else doing that would have been chastised by the older generation, except that he was able to put it together and win with it. So we like the idea of the underdog. We like the idea of people transcending their limits. We like the aggressive style of one pocket. He's kind of a superhero, like a Robin Hood, like an underdog. And that's kind of, we love what Tony's done. And so I love what Tony's done. But I'm also a realist, and I also believe that people that strike the balls at Filler's level have a huge edge. And so that's not the whole of my pick, but I'm just saying that's why when people talk about Tony alongside of Alex and Dennis, that's where I kind of say, well, that's where, if it seems like, if I sounded disrespectful, it's only because I'm saying no. Dennis and Alex in particular moves every bit as good as Tony. He plays a different style, but he also out executes them by a substantial margin, and that's shown with the results of when they played. And so that's all I think we're saying.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of, and apparently somebody reached out to me and told me that I used the term shortstop in the wrong sort of way. I think of a shortstop as like a lower tiered pro player to a very, very, very good amateur player. And I was told that a shortstop is basically anybody like 650 Fargo and up to like 700. And I don't know. So correct me if I'm wrong, but so I'm going to use shortstop as my definition of it. And there are a lot of shortstop pros in the U.S., people like Josh Roberts. And Josh Roberts is not a low pro, but he's kind of like the upper tier of them. To even like Joey Gray, Chip Compton, Shane McMinn, players like that who do have a really, really strong one pocket game, who punch way above their pay grade in the game of one pocket. That they can't they can absolutely compete with players like Shane Van Boning and Sky Woodward and even Justin Bergman to a lesser degree in one pocket, but they just can't hang in the rotation games. And that is a testament to their ability to move around the table in the way that, people say moving around in one pocket. So I'm not trying to like disrespect Tony by saying that he's not necessarily at the level of some of these players, but I kind of look at Tony as being like the best of like that category of U.S. pros that play one pocket. He is kind of there, and it used to be Scott Frost, and now Josh Roberts is coming up through the ranks, definitely for sure, to kind of challenge Tony. But Tony definitely can play some really, really solid one pocket. But at the end of the day, I think that the firepower that you're talking about, if you have it and you're a top one pocket player like the Dennis, Alex, and Boosty, you separate yourself from the rest of the pack. And hopefully that's a little bit better of a clarification for what I was meaning.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. I think you absolutely nailed it. And I think that we're going to see that the U.S. shortstop one-pocket specialists, or not even necessarily specialists, but the people like the Danny Smiths, like you mentioned, the Justin Halls, the Billy Thorpes, the guys that are not necessarily elite rotation players yet, but that play a great game of one-pocket. I predict that we're going to see that is going to be a dying breed as one-pocket becomes, there's enough one pocket action, enough one pocket tournaments that as one pocket grows internationally, the way 9-ball grew internationally, I believe that the game will no longer, you're no longer going to be able to be like a lower end, like you said, shortstop type player or lower end pro that just kind of watches a few videos and plays some money games in your back pool hall, picks up a few moves, and then you can go snipe European champions because they don't know how to play the game. Those days are fun. I've had my share, but I think that's going to be a thing of the past. I think that as one pocket becomes worldwide and as all the European players, it's going to become a game where I think that the elite players are going to dominate, and that you're not going to catch very many elite players that can't play good one pocket, 10 years from now. That's kind of where I think it's going.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that discussion is kind of where we're at right here with this event, right? We have kind of the old guard and kind of the next generation of European players coming into this one pocket maybe era that we're coming into in the U.S., or at least a different discourse of the one pocket era. And this is kind of, there's definitely European pros that are coming up as well that maybe I don't even know if Fedor Gorst knows the rules of one pocket. He might be a one pocket champion. I just don't know. You have other European pros coming up, younger, coming up through the ranks, Aklanti Kachi, Alexander Kazakis, stuff like that. I don't know that they play one pocket at all, but I know that they shoot the ball so damn straight that it only takes a few, maybe weeks or months to really learn the moves of one pocket to really be playing the game at a really top level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the top European players, or the top worldwide players, not just the Europeans, the Philippines, all these things, I think the best in the world are so strong right now that the skill edge is growing between the upper echelon rotation players versus the shortstops. And I also think that the knowledge edge is diminishing. So the skill gap is getting bigger and the knowledge gap is getting smaller. And so when it comes to who I like between Filler and Chohan, this is a really, really tough one. And I'll say this. I did not want to make a bold prediction. Like, this definitely could go either way. But here's the problem I have, and the reason I didn't want to make a big bet on this match or something, is that Tony might win, but I don't like betting on Tony simply for the fact, even if he's the favorite, he might be the favorite, but here's the problem. There's no question in my mind that Josh Filler will become a better one pocket player than Tony, unless he just loses interest in the game or something horrible happens to him. But the bottom line is that if I'm betting on Tony, Tony might be a better one pocket player right now. He might win this race. More experience. He's definitely got an aggressive style of play. He plays the game the way very few people have played it. But the problem is that I feel like it's inevitable that Josh is going to eclipse him. And so if I'm betting on Tony, then I just feel like I'm betting on I'm betting that Josh hasn't figured the game out yet. And it's like, I don't know, man. I just don't like the idea of betting on somebody that I know will be an underdog and hoping that I catch him while he's still a slight favorite. It's like, I don't like that idea. And so it's weird to, then again, betting on Filler, then it's like, well, he's going up against one of the best one pocket players in the world with a ton of experience, and he's still learning the game. So it's like, it's a really interesting matchup. I don't know if Josh has caught up with Tony yet, but I just, even if it's wrong, I have to pick Filler just because I got to go with a guy that has that big of a skill edge and that big of a striking edge. I've said before, I think that the moving game is overrated a little bit. I've already said that I think the skill edge has grown and I think the knowledge edge is diminished. I've said that I think Filler, I said last week regarding 8-ball that Filler's run 286 balls in straight pool. He's made deep caches in the one pocket. He's been playing the game and preparing for the game. So betting against, if you're betting on Tony, you're kind of betting against Filler in my mind. And I don't like betting against that guy.
I couldn't agree more. Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to bet on Tampa Bay next year.
That must be a Tom Brady reference.
Yeah, I go back to, if I'm out there wondering in pool player land, listening to this, if the best thing I can do is watch a one pocket match or not. These guys are both great pool players, and knowing what we know about pool, is watching this match as helpful to the majority of pool players out there as watching an eyeball match? I'll just come back to that question.
Well, I'll just throw one thing in there. We were talking about motivation, right? There's a lot of people that have been playing 9-ball their whole life that watching a 9-ball match, it just looks boring because the pros never miss, and they just seems like they can all just run every rack and nobody makes any mistakes, and I can never do any of that. And you've seen, after you've watched 9-ball for 20 years, it can get a little monotonous. But one pocket, if you like the game and if you've got something on the game, gets really, really interesting to watch. And it's especially with a matchup of two explosive players. So bottom line is, if you enjoy it, then it's good for the game. Because if you're having fun and you're enjoying pool, then that can't be bad, right?
What do you think, Nate? A player to be watching.
Well, real
10 ball or
quick,
one pocket.
real quick, let's give our predictions for the match, and then let's take that question on. So, Demetrius, it sounds like you're taking Joshua Filler. It's a race of 21. So, what's your score?
To 21, I will take Filler 21-17, and that's you know what, I'm willing to be made a fool. I will tell you this: this is a speculative prediction. I have no idea what's going to happen because I don't want anyone to go out and make a big bet on Filler because of what I'm saying. But I'll just pick Filler 21-17.
All right, Rob, what do you think?
Filler 21-20.
Ooh.
That would be. I hope it does.
I want to take Tony so bad. I mean, I feel like I just spent the last 10 minutes talking about why Joshua Filler is going to win this match. And part of that was literally trying to almost talk myself into taking Filler just because of exactly what you were talking about, Demetrius. It's hard to bet against somebody who has their entire future ahead of them. And it's only a matter of, swinging the cue a few more times at the game to really have it figured out at a really, really elite level. So I'm trying to talk myself into Joshua Filler, and I could see this going either way, and I do honestly have to take Joshua Filler for all of the reasons that we had talked about thus far. And I feel like I've really been disrespectful to Tony throughout this entire conversation, and I really, really did not mean to. Tony, I think, is the best. He's probably the best U.S. one pocket player that we have. Is there anybody else you'd put in front of him?
I don't think so. I there was a time when Shane would have been in the running, but I know that Tony got there with him, but I also know that was when he was really peaking, and I think that. But Shane, I just don't think that Shane's got the desire, or that he hasn't really made that a challenge. I don't know that. I mean,
maybe
you're right. I don't think Scott Frost gets there. Yeah. I don't think that Justin Bergman has played enough one pocket to get there.
Josh Roberts.
So yeah, you're right. The short answer, no, he's the best in the U.S.
I think Josh Roberts is getting close. I really respect his game, but not quite there yet. Chip Compton, another honorable mention, but I think Tony is the best one pocket player the U.S. has to offer, but I just don't think it's enough. I think the firepower that Joshua Filler has, playing every single day, all the time. At some point in time, he's gonna make a lot of these stupid, crazy, blasphemous, wild shots that you see him shooting at, that you're kind of scratch your head and be like, why would you ever shoot at this? And then you see the ball just go into the center of the cup, and you're like, oh, because you cue the ball way better than I'll ever dream of being able to do. So at the end of the day, I think Joshua Filler wins for that reason. So I'll take Joshua Filler 21-18 as well. So. Rob, you had said basically in so many words, does watching one pocket offer anything differently than watching 8-ball, 9-ball, 10-ball?
Yeah, the average pool player out there.
Yeah. And I think
what's their motivation for watching this versus watching a?
Yeah. Well, this is your question, so why don't you take it on first?
Well, I was asking you to.
Oh.
For your opinions on it.
Demetrius, you want me to go first?
Yeah, I personally, I think it's difficult for an A and B player to get into a one pocket game. The average A and B player.
Well, now are you talking a motivation to watch it?
That's my opinion on that, but I was asking your guys' opinion.
Are you talking your motivation to watch it, or are you talking about being able to get anything out of it?
and what you're going to get out of it both.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
if you have a motivation, that's the reason for watching it. So, what would that be? Is my question to you guys.
Well, I would say let's not take on the idea of should an A player or does a A player or a B player want to watch something like this, because it's so subjective to the individual person as a whole. So I think, but we can absolutely take on the idea of should a player want to watch this as far as getting something out of it. And
that's my question.
Yeah. And I think one pocket does offer a lot of opportunities. It teaches you a lot of really neat bank shots, kind of two-way safety shots that you can kind of kick, or you can kind of shoot at a two-rail bank shot while kind of playing a safety. That could be, useful in a 9-ball game or something like that when you're riding, or when you're on the 9-ball or something like that. But for the most part, it just teaches you more about the game. It teaches you a more well-rounded view of everything that's happening in the game. And I think that is definitely something of value. Knowing shots that you may only see once a year, or you may never see. Just knowing that you have that knowledge in the bag and you have that tool in the shed, so to speak, it's really hard to change a tire if you don't have a tire rod, right? So you may not always need a tire rod, but just having that in the bag, so to speak, it's a very valuable thing to have. And I think One Pocket offers just about every single shot that is ever possible in a game of pool. So being able to really know all of these shots and learn them at a high level, I think that's definitely something that's valuable to the game.
Yeah, I don't think there's a big mystery to it. I think that if you enjoy it, watch it. And if you're like an A or B player, if you don't find it interesting, then I don't know that you should. If you're an intermediate player and you don't find One Pocket interesting, or if you're a beginner player and you don't really know how to play the game well enough to even appreciate what exactly they're doing, and you don't recognize how they're doing what they're doing, or if you're not into it, then I don't really know that I would recommend watching something that bores you and you don't understand. Like, you might as well watch chess to get better at pool at that point, which it's like, I don't really get it. Like, if you really like it or if you don't understand it, then I don't know why you'd really want to watch it. If you like it and enjoy it, then even if you're not getting a lot of it out of it, like Nate's saying, I mean, you probably will, but even if you don't, even if you're just watching for entertainment, then watch it. I think that as far as what you're going to get out of it, if you play the game, I think you're going to get. I think a good question is, should an intermediate or an advanced, should an intermediate player play One Pocket? And I think the answer is yes. I think if you're an intermediate, maybe beginners not, but like once you get to the point where you can run a couple racks of 9-ball, you should be able to play some One Pocket, and it is a fun game. So that brings in motivation, learning new games, learning new shots, and then opening up the door to watching these streams, which can be a lot of fun. Really, in my opinion, even more entertaining than watching rotation matches. So therefore, I think that I wouldn't recommend playing One Pocket when you're still learning how to play shape and 9-ball. But once you learn how the balls work, and if you're an intermediate player, I think you should learn One Pocket. If you already know the rules and you enjoy watching it, watch it. But that's it, but don't think don't force yourself. If you're not there yet, or if you're not enjoying it, then I don't see any benefit to forcing yourself.
Yeah, I would recommend, I think, to the average pool player out there who might want to watch One Pocket, to watch it with a companion who happens to be a more advanced player, so that, because there's things that they do when all the balls get to the other side of the table. Sometimes that happens in One Pocket, and you go, well, now what are they doing? So, those kind of moves in the game where you're positioning balls in areas, and it gets. I know that match with Compton and Chohan, they had a couple of games where they're just up there, just kicking them balls around in the corner pockets just to try to get a hair of an advantage of a position that. These other players that are learning the game are going to, what are they doing? Why are they doing all that? So they'd have somebody to be a sounding board for you when you have these questions. That more advanced player would be able to probably.
That is definitely something true too. I think that's a very wise thing you just said, Rob. There are a lot of aspects of this game that. You think that they don't really make any sense, and they're very, very small movements that you're seeing, just kind of ticking the ball maybe an inch or two. They're not moving them an inch for no reason. They're moving every shot that you see in One Pocket. It might not make sense to you, but there is not only a defensive aspect to every single shot, there is also an offensive aspect to every single shot. At least
once you can appreciate that, then your attitude toward that whole thing changes. Yes. I don't think an A player or B player watching that, just on their own can kind of grasp that kind of thing.
I would say the average A to B player, but there are definitely just like there's specialized One Pocket pros, there are definitely specialized, A and B players who,
Well, those are the players that are getting after it, are going to get after it, and someday are going to be exceptional players like Denny and anybody else.
Well, I do want to plug that real quick with my camps. I would kind of consider myself in that shortstop, category as far as low end pro players that can play a pretty good game of One Pocket. And I don't want to, get too into my resume as far as One Pocket goes, but I do want to say that I know how to play the game pretty well. And for those players that are thinking about training pool, if you are passionate about One Pocket, when you're scheduling your 3-day boot camp with me, let me know, and we can definitely build into the one-on-one curriculum that we establish. I'm definitely happy to send you home 2 balls better, and I'm not joking. Like 2 balls better. That's what I do.
Yeah, for sure. And you can give you'll have your coach's corner coming up soon too, that we can chat about that. But I think other than that, I think we can wrap up this discussion there, and we can move on to the end of the podcast.
Okay, wrapping it up is almost as fun as jumping into it, isn't it?
Something like that. So I guess the one thing that I wanted to discuss earlier. So, Rob, you had hinted earlier that you wanted to know my motivation for doing the podcast.
Well, I'm curious about, but I do know myself personally, but I'm asking for the listeners.
You're
asking for a friend.
You're trying to create content. I see what you're doing there. I like that. Good for you. So I guess I can answer this quickly. And the motivation for the podcast was I really should just get this number knotted down because I have to come up with it so often. I think I listen to somewhere between 26 and 27 different podcasts. Most of them are at least 3 to 4 times a week. Basically, I have 6 hours of content that I listen to every single day on podcasts. So I listen to about 6 hours of podcasts every day. I do that while I'm doing work for the podcast or, just walking around the apartment, cleaning, doing dishes, anything that, lying in bed before I go to, sleep. I listen to about 6 hours worth of podcasts every single day. I get my sports, my politics, my current events, my news, my opinion pieces. Basically I get all of my news, my information from podcasts. I love podcasts. At one point I did search podcasts, pool podcasts on iTunes, and I came up with 3 podcasts, basically. I came up with Mike Howerton's podcast, pool podcasts, and then I came up with a couple of other podcasts that I don't even know what they are. They haven't had a podcast for like 3 years, and one of them I listened to, and it was like a bunch of like Guidos just hanging around a table talking about chicks and video games, and that's figuratively speaking. It was a stupid podcast. It had nothing to do with pool. I listened to like an hour of this. I'll never get that hour of my life back. And it literally, they didn't even mention a single thing about pool. So it's like, this is what we have to offer in the world of pool. Like, this is what our medium is. So, and then I started thinking about it. That was kind of like my catalyst. Like, what is out there? And so I started thinking about, if you wanted to get current event news in pool, where would you go? And there are a couple forums. They do exist. So you have AZ Billiards. You have, pool forums. You could always go to like pros and just follow them but all of it required basically reading. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's a way that you knew about that I don't. If you want to get pool knowledge, you have to sit there and you have to scroll through articles. You have to scroll through threads. You have to scroll through people's opinions, and you just literally read about AZ Billiard posts or, pool is not dead threads, something like that. And that is what you have to offer. Maybe you could go to, some newspapers or something or some of the magazines. And those are great options too, but they can only come out with a magazine every so often. If something happens in the US Open, you don't want to wait 3 weeks for a magazine to drop so that you can read about it and find out what happened there. And that's not to take away from what people like Mike Pinoza do either, because they give you inside stories that you have to be there to know, and that definitely has its place. The idea is there's nothing on the spot news that you can come up with that has opinion pieces as well as what happened. And instead of being, that pool person that says, well, I hope this happens at some point in time, I decided to take some initiative and do it myself. So that is, I guess, the motivation, at least another motivation for why I started the podcast and why I continue doing this to this day, is to give that knowledge out there to the players and the people who want to consume it. That, there really isn't a lot of good mediums. So I don't know. That's it.
So you're the now generation. That's it, huh? That get them podcasts cooking, baby.
I am trying nothing more than to just be a medium between what people want and how they can get it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and get it quickly, and get it with some enthusiasm, right?
And with old people, right, Rob?
Well,
was that rude?
Well, all I know is it is more fun to miss a 5-railer than it is to miss any shot in pocket pool.
You just hate pool so much. So
I think it reveals a lot about Rob when he chooses his game based on which venue is more enjoyable to dog it.
Yes. Yes. The least painful option at this point in my life. When you get over 50, you have to be thinking in certain terms, but when you get over 70, there's only a few terms you can think in. You don't have a lot of options anymore.
That's a lot of fun. So I guess why don't we branch from here into our fan question of the day? And what I need to do is I need to start writing down who actually did these. I'm not very organized. Anybody who's been around the podcast for a long time knows that I struggle with the organization part of this. So I don't actually know who asked these questions. I need to get on that and do it better in the future. So forgive me for whoever is writing these in. But the question this week is going to be, how do you bank and kick? Do you use a system? Do you go by feel? And before we answer this, I do want to say that we are running very thin on fan questions. Rob and I used to do our 2-tip segment. We are absolutely okay going back to doing that. But if you, as a listener, find the fan questions fun, get your questions in and we will talk about them. We are running very dry on them right now. So we will absolutely read them out on air, live, if you have a question. So with that, Rob, why don't you take it away first? How do you bank and how do you kick?
Okay, it depends. For me, it depends on how the table's playing. If the rails are spongy, bank wide or whatever, things like that. If the rails are brand new, if the cloth is new. So playing table conditions will dictate to me whether I'm going to play more by feel or by system. There's plenty of systems out there to use. It seems to me if it's a tight table, it means pure. I'm talking about with slightly used cloth and true fast rails. I will use more systems with banking. But if it's kind of a 7-foot table with say valley condition type rails. The older valley rails, then I'll go by feel. I'll go okay because you got to know how that's got to feel. So I use both, depending on those things.
All right.
How about you,
Demetrius? Why don't you go next?
Yep, I can answer this very nicely. I'm going to create 3 buckets. The first is the people that use feel only. The other extreme is the people that are extremely, know a million systems and stick to them absolutely. And then the third bucket is people that know a handful of systems, use them to get close, and then kind of adjust by feel of experience. I would say banks, you should just shoot by feel. Kick shots, you can use either of the second or third bucket. You can either have a handful of systems that you use to get close, and then based on experience and feel, you can just adjust kind of based on the table of your, how it feels. Or I know a couple of top players that are actually know a bunch of systems and stick to them and don't adjust at all. They just stick with them. But most players, I think, bank by feel, know a handful of systems to get close and feel it in with the kicks. I think that's what I would recommend.
All right. So Demetrius, I'm going to give you 2 options, and I'll let you choose one of them live on air. So either you are never going to go before me again, or you are just going to get kicked off the podcast for the rest of the time. Because everything that I feel like I want to say, you say before me whenever I let you go first.
Well, I guess you better go first because I'm not leaving without a fight. So
no, that's fun. No, I agree with that. I don't know any banking systems, so first off, I should say I know almost no systems at all. I know a 2-rail kicking system. I know a 1-rail kicking system. And those are the most basic of ones. But other than that, I mean, I know no kicking systems at all. So, but I completely bank off of feel. I and that's probably why I bank so bad. But I don't, as bad as I bank, I kick way worse. So you don't want to listen to me at all. So basically, I have no credibility in this conversation at all, and I'm just going to stop talking at this point because I have nothing to offer this conversation. I'll just say that I echo what Demetrius said, and that sounds probably bad after saying I have nothing to offer this, but Demetrius does know what he's talking about. Don't worry.
Yeah, take up 3 cushion and learn a few systems, and your kicking will get a lot better, even on any size table, under any conditions.
I probably do need to do that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But so we can leave that discussion there. And Demetrius, why don't you take it away with your Coach's Corner?
Sure. I want to do something a little different with the Coach's Corner this week because I feel that we've already had some good conversations about some instructional things. And so inspired by some one-pocket conversation, I want to just talk a little bit about my favorite one-pocket story. I think that this is something that the listeners will enjoy. This was not something that happened to me. So I heard this but a player I know this is probably, 20 years ago at this point, but he went to a pool tournament in Wisconsin actually. And, he was having a tough day. He got a tough draw. He got beat out of the tournament early, didn't play all that well. Things weren't really going his way. But, after he got beat, he decided he ended up getting into a game with with an older gentleman playing some 100 a game one pocket. And so they started playing and they put up the money because they didn't know each other. And, $100, you might put up the money with a stranger. So they just put up 100 each on the lights or whatever, tucked it into the ball return, whatever it was. And they just, whoever won, then you'd post up for the next game. So the guy I know that was telling me the story, he jumped out and started playing really good. And, he started getting a few games ahead, but it wasn't easy because, this older guy, he was experienced and he played deliberate. He didn't make a lot of careless mistakes. And so even the games that he was, even the games that this guy was winning, he was having to win a lot of them later in stages in the game, and they were taking a while. And then the older guy was winning some games too. So, he'd win, he wasn't winning every game. He was winning 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 3 or, stuff like that. So it was slow, but it was steady, and it was clear that, this guy was the better player, and he was, the younger guy was the better player, and he was kind of grinding it out. And after playing for 5 or 6 hours, he was up like $600, or $700, something like that. And he was feeling pretty good. But now he was kind of at the spot where he was like ready for the other guy to quit. He's like, all right, I'm up like $600-700. I've established I'm the better player. We've been playing all day. If this other guy wanted to pull up, that'd be great because then I could just, be up. I could be winner for the weekend. I could, buy a drink, kind of relax, call it a day. But the other guy didn't really show any signs of quitting, and, of course, when you're playing for money, you don't quit when you're ahead, generally speaking. So they keep playing and this guy is like, the younger guy is just getting kind of irritated because these games are just taking longer and longer, and the guy's playing better. And so now they're just kind of seesawing, and, they're going back and forth, and hours are passing, and maybe he's up one more game. He's just like, at what point is this guy going to pull up? And finally, after about 8 or 9 hours of play, when the guy went to post up for his next game, up until this point, he'd been posting with $100 bills. And when he posted up for the next game, he posted up with 520s. And so the younger guy's like, well, that's a little different. Huh. Okay. He might be out of the hundreds, might be getting close here. And after winning that game, the guy pulled out 3 more 20s and then a couple of 10s and a 5. And then he excused himself, went out to his car, came back and fished out and rounded out like a couple more 5s and some 1s to make up the $100 for the last game. And so, and he put up the money and he said, you can count it as 100. And so the guy's like, the younger guy's like, well, looks like he's on his last shell. And he's like, this is awesome. He's like, I'm up like whatever, $900. If I win this, I'm up 1,000. Looks like the guy's out of cash. I could call it a day. I've won it. It's a pretty good score. And so he's like, I have to win this game. He's like, I have to win this game because, man, if the guy wins this game, he could come back. It could go for another 5 hours. Like, I just need to put this thing away. He's tired. He's worn out. I just want to put this guy away. So they play, and this guy just bears down. But man, you could tell, the older guy obviously wants to win this game too. And you could tell it was like a hill. They were both digging really deep, really, really refocused. Even after playing all this time, they were both every shot like it was a hill. And it comes down to the last ball. And it's just a nail biter. And he's got this long cross bank. He finally gets a kind of a chance to win, but he's got to shoot it with a little spin to miss the kiss. And he's shooting from 7 feet away. And it's just like, but this is his best chance to score. And he just needs to make this shot. And when he was telling me the story, he explained to me like, how it just seemed like the most important shot he's ever shot in his life. And he got on the ball. And he got down, and he could just feel it, and he could see the edge of the ball, and he turned it in, and he set that cue ball 7 feet away, clipped the edge of it, beat the kiss, and watched that ball trickle over, hang up, and topple into his hole. And he said, I just remember how excited he was. That was like the best shot I've ever made. And as he collects the money, the old guy reaches into his under pocket, pulls out a roll of $100 bills, and posts up for the next game. And the young guy just stared in complete disbelief, like, are you kidding me? And the old guy just calmly racked the balls. And the young guy was so spent and so rattled and was so sure it was over, he didn't know what to do. And before you know it, this guy caught a gear, started coming back and outplaying him, and he was just, like, completely spent and lost his focus. And the old guy ended up coming back and getting even and quitting. And now the guy is stuck for like $100 in table time on top of having let this guy get off the hook after getting beaten out and being stuck hotel and gas. And he couldn't believe what happened. And so anyway, I won't say who that story happened to, but that's got to be one of my favorite stories. And what a great move. It just shows that experience is more than knowing how to move the balls around. So
you're going to tell me off air. I know that.
Yeah, for sure.
No, that's a good story. I like that. That's funny. Rob, you still here?
I'm here.
Oh, heck yeah, you're still here.
I stayed for the coach's corner. I did. Stayed for the story.
Yay.
Why not?
Well, I guess
what else do I got to do?
That's it, huh? That's a podcast.
That's the podcast. Let's wrap it up, boys.
All
Thanks for listening,
right.
folks.
I got to do one more thing because I've got to do this last week, so I'm going to do it double this week. And I said I was going to do this right before we left for our big long hiatus. And this is to try to spark some interest into doing this because this is a very valuable thing for the podcast as far as getting out there and getting some more notoriety, kind of free notoriety. And that is Apple iTunes will be more likely to show up in other people's feeds based off of the amount of reviews that your podcast has. So I am trying to do this thing that another one of the podcasts that I listen to does, and that is basically reading reviews on air that are in the reviews for the podcast. And last time I did it, we actually had 2 more people do reviews, which is great. That is what I was hoping for. I guess I should say they left reviews. There was like 6 or 7 more people that just left a star rating. So you can leave a rating, or you can leave a rating and a review. So 6 more people left ratings, and then 2 more people left ratings and reviews. Not that many. I was hoping for a little bit more, but the idea is we're trying to get more and more of those so that this podcast will show up in people's feeds more likely, just based off of what they're already listening to. So that was a really long way of saying head over to Apple iTunes if you listen through iTunes, and please leave a rating and a review for the podcast. So the first one we will read is, if you are into pool, this is a great podcast to listen to. Keep it up, guys. So, nice. Makes me happy.
Nice.
And then the other one that was new since the last time was, Nate, Rob, and Demetrius do a great job discussing pool and pool-related topics in an informational and friendly way. That was from Ryan Harmson, and the other one was from King Spade 2006. So This is going to be your iTunes name, I think. So I don't know exactly who did the second one, but Ryan Harmson, we do know. He is actually a Patreon, I think, to the podcast. Yeah, Ryan Harmson is a Patreon to the podcast. And like I said in the beginning of the podcast, if you would like to become a Patreon subscriber to the podcast and really support the future of the podcast, the stuff that we're doing is totally free. It'll always be free, but there will be some decisions being made, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, in the coming weeks. So if you would like to become a Patreon and help with kind of moving the podcast forward in the future, please do. And other than that, Demetrius, Rob, I thank you again for joining me for one more week.
Well, I think everybody's got to know that if they don't start helping, you got to get a job.
I did just graduate college, so it is. And anybody who's been around the podcast for a little while, like I said in the beginning, this was kind of a trial run for sure to see what I can do with the podcast, to see if a job is going to be necessary. So,
well, I'm still impressed with your effort on the Moscone Cup. I think I'll always be impressed with that.
Aw.
Yeah, I know.
I like talking about stuff like this because it makes my ego so big.
I know, you get so gushy then, huh?
I know, I do. All right, so Demetrius, thank you again for joining us.
Okay, Demi.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you. You guys have a great week.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, until next week.
Adios, folks.